From FBI Director Chris Wray, welcome. At our second FBI oversight hearing in as many years. When I became chair, I promised to restore the Judiciary Committee's traditional oversight role, including annual oversight hearings for key agencies within our jurisdiction. We've already held the committee's first Department of Justice oversight hearing since 2017, October, and its first Department of Homeland Security oversight hearing since January 2018. There's more to come. Director Wray, when you appeared before the committee last March, just 2 months after the January 6th attack on our Capitol, you told us that domestic terrorism was, quote, metastasizing around the country for a long time now, and it's not going away anytime soon. I first held a hearing on domestic terrorism, the threat to America, in 2012, 10 years ago, after a white supremacist gunman murdered 7 Sikh worshipers in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. Today, 10 years later, I'm afraid that threat has only grown worse. In the decades since Oak Creek, violent white supremacists have slaughtered innocent Americans in a series of sickening attacks. They included the mass shootings at the Emmanuel AME Church in South Carolina in 2015, Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018, and a Walmart in El Paso, Texas in 2019. Just this May, a white supremacist marched into a Tops grocery store in Buffalo, New York, massacring 10 black Americans in cold blood. Last year, Director Wray, you told the committee that the top domestic terror threat was, and I quote, continues to be those we identify as racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically those who advocate for the superiority of the white race. You also said that the FBI has elevated racially motivated violent extremism to its top priority, on the same level as ISIS. I look forward to hearing from you about what steps the FBI is taking to protect our communities from this threat. Racist acts of terror like the Buffalo Massacre represent the most persistent, lethal domestic terror threats in our communities, but they are not our only threats by far. So-called militia violent extremists, or MVEs, and other anti-government extremists pose a growing threat to law enforcement and government officials, and as we saw here on January 6th, to our democratic institutions themselves. This is part of the growing trend of politically motivated threats and violence that should alarm every member of this committee. Every one of us should join in condemning the use of violence or threats of violence to advance any political goals, no matter the ideology. But over the past 2 years, our nation's public servants have faced a wave of violence and violent threats. Just yesterday in this room, the committee heard from election officials, Democrats and Republicans, who are receiving death threats because of their work during the 2020 election. We've seen an appalling rise in violent threats against public health workers, school officials, judges, members of Congress, members of the Supreme Court. And we've seen unacceptable, in some cases deadly violence toward law enforcement officers who put their lives on the line to protect us. The dual threats of domestic terrorism and hate crimes are heightened by easy access to firearms in America, especially deadly assault weapons. Matthew Olson, the Justice Department's top counterterrorism official, recently said, the ability of violent extremists to acquire military-grade weapons in this country contributes significantly to their ability to kill and inflict harm on a massive scale. And we cannot ignore the dominant role guns play in assaults and killings of police officers. Our nation is awash in guns. Estimates are 400 million firearms in this nation, from straw purchase handguns to assault weapons that can pierce the Kevlar vest that are supposed to protect our men and women in uniform. Director Wray, I hope you'll discuss how the proliferation of assault weapons impacts the work of the FBI and other law enforcement. We have a lot of ground to cover today. I look forward to your testimony, and with that, I turn to my friend, Ranking Member Grassley, for his opening statement.